On the program tonight, our big debate. The Prime Minister reaches out to Kashmir's generation next. But what sort of resonance has his address had on the ground in the valley? Will he manage to open a line of communication with Kashmir's generation next? Or has his address come too late in a period which is being described as a watershed moment in the valley? That's our big debate tonight. And like every night, you can take part in our debate online. The website is now open for your votes. Our webpage, ndtv.com/buckstops here. Like every night, you can also tweet me. We run your tweets through the length of this big debate tonight, 60 minutes with our special focus on Jammu and Kashmir. And my Twitter handle, @BDutt. Let's get started with our special story tonight. It's now widely acknowledged that in these 2 months of violence and unrest that the Kashmir Valley has seen, it's children and teenagers that have become the face of the conflagration. And it is to this generation that the Prime Minister tried to speak directly today, acknowledging both their pain and their anguish, acknowledging that there is an entire generation that has grown up in the shadow of conflict. But will his attempt to reach out directly to Kashmir's generation next have the impact that it seeks, or has his address come just too late? Kashmir's children of conflict, the children and teenagers who have become the face of the valley's crisis. A 2-month strike that began with the death of this 17-year-old boy, Tufail Mattu, a boy who was just walking back home from a tuition class when a tear gas shell, apparently meant for a protesting mob, burst open his head and claimed his life. Today, it was to these young men who have poured out onto the streets in defiance of not just the curfew, but possible death itself, that the Prime Minister sought to speak directly.
Thank you.
Flanked by the key ministers of his government, Dr. Singh went on television to accept both their anger and their pain as entirely legitimate. While other politicians in the last 2 months may have mentioned Pakistan or prefixed their description of protesters with the now commonly used phrase stone pelters, the Prime Minister today was careful to make no moral judgments at all, quietly accepting that this was a generation that was disengaged, alienated and traumatized.
कश्मीर के जो नौजवान गुस्से में सड़कों पर आ रहे हैं, उनके दर्द और मायूसी को मैं समझ सकता हूं। इनमें से बहुत से नौजवानों ने तो अपनी जिंदगी में केवल खून खराबा और फितना फसादी देखी, जिनका उनके दिल और दिमाग पर गहरा असर पड़ा है।
Speaking in Urdu, Manmohan Singh accepted that mistakes had been made, and referring repeatedly to Kashmir's generation next, the Prime Minister conceded that there were no easy solutions in sight.
मैं इस बात को मानता हूं कि जम्मू कश्मीर के मसलों के लिए एक ऐसा सियासी हल जरूरी है जो लोगों के अलग-अलगी के एहसास को दूर कर सके। इसे सिर्फ बातचीत के जरिए ही हासिल किया जा सकता है। हम इसके लिए तैयार हैं। हम जमहूरी अमल के जरिए सभी मसलों पर बातचीत के लिए तैयार हैं।
And in a state where security forces have been locked into endless hostile confrontation with the raw rage of street protesters, the Prime Minister acknowledged that public sentiment on the controversial Armed Forces Special Powers Act had often been negative.
हम आर्म्ड फोर्सेस स्पेशल पावर्स एक्ट के मसले पर लोगों के ख्यालात को समझते हैं। आखिरकार जम्मू और कश्मीर पुलिस को कानून और व्यवस्था की ड्यूटी की जिम्मेदारी खुद ही लेनी होगी।
As Kashmir watched and listened to every word, the one complaint was why the Prime Minister had not broken his silence much earlier. But the irony was inescapable to all. This was no longer the valley of 1990 when the separatist movement first erupted, or even 2000 when militancy was the biggest challenge. This was the Kashmir in 2010, where despite being ruled by the youngest chief minister in the country, it's the young men and women who have lived in the shadow of conflict since they were born that India has to find a way, some way, any way of talking to. Barkha Dutt for NDTV. All right, our big debate tonight: has the Prime Minister's peace missive come too late, or will it speak to the young men and women of the Kashmir Valley? Let's get straight into our debate with Sajjad Lone joining us from Srinagar tonight. Sajjad, one of the things that I found interesting in the Prime Minister's statement is that unlike many of his colleagues in government who have repeatedly used, for example, the by now cliched prefix that even us in the media are guilty of using, stone pelters, to describe and club all protesters, he didn't use that. He kept his address pretty free from value-loaded adjectives. Did you see that at least as a positive beginning?
Well, Barkha, I wish I could say that, but Prime Minister, the only symbolic thing was that he addressed to the nation, that's the people of India, and to his nation, the people of India. And I think it's the second or the third time that any Prime Minister has done. But apart from that, I think there were some paragraphs when I read through, on the internet, I read the whole statement, which were weighty. But I would say that clubbing it with the package on employment, the Panchayati Raj and other things, diluted the whole context, you see, because Prime Minister came and addressed against a specific context, that is of killings in the last 2 months. And I think that clubbing it with a lot of economics and other things, somehow the desirables, if any, are bound to drown in the din of the undesirables which were clubbed at the end of the statement.
So can I understand, Sajjad, what you're saying? You're basically saying that by mixing economics with politics, the Prime Minister diffused the import of his own speech.
Yes. You see, Barkha, I'll tell you something. India is doing economically very well. If Indian economy was an attraction, then you would not have this problem here in the first place. Because we all know they are doing very well. Still people are on the streets, so it's not an attraction enough for them to keep them in their homes. So you come up with a package. What happens is that this gives an impression as if these people are there because they don't have jobs. As if these people are there because there is not good governance. So I would have thought that we needed a much less ambivalent message as on date.
All right, I understand what you're saying. You're saying it got mixed up somewhere, the message got blurred with that reference to that job panel, which includes Narayan Murthy and Tarun Das. Mehbooba Mufti, you kept away from that all-party delegation today. You have been asking all along for the Prime Minister to step in. Now he has, and people like you are keeping away. Why is that?
No, basically the delegation was decided a month back, and they had sought an appointment with the Prime Minister. It took them a month and 40 more killings to reach there. So when we have to meet the Prime Minister and we have something, you know, positive to contribute, we will definitely seek an appointment and meet him. We have no qualms about that. But having said that, you know, what the Prime Minister said today, it's a good beginning, though very late, after 51 killings, after, you know, hundreds of people injured in the hospital, hundreds of people behind the bars, youth behind the bars, but he has started something. I agree with Sajjad. I would say that political process should be the priority at this point of time. We have received economic packages for the last 63 years, but economic packages can only benefit once there is peace, there is prosperity, and there is resolution of the basic problem. So that's where I think the thing which has been started by the Prime Minister, he needs to take it to the logical conclusion and give the youth on the streets of Kashmir first justice for the 51 killings, for those who are injured, release the boys, young boys who are behind the bars and other Hurriyat leaders, and include everybody, because they have been able to get the services of Gilani Saab to bring some calm, but they need to engage him, not only use him.
Well, actually, Syed Ali Shah Gilani has said in his response to the Prime Minister's speech that there's nothing new in the Prime Minister's speech, and that the Indian government needs to first withdraw its troops. Before I go to the BJP and the Congress and my other guests, Mehbooba, was there anything about the Prime Minister's speech that indicated to you a shift in New Delhi's understanding? Because, for example, just to point you to Mr. Chidambaram's speech in Parliament, he described Kashmir as a unique problem that needs a unique solution. Today we had Dr. Manmohan Singh admitting that politics has not worked thus far, that there are no easy solutions in sight. Are you sensing that Delhi, albeit very late, 2 months too late, is finally beginning to understand the depth of what they're dealing with?
Yeah, there were some very, positive things in the Prime Minister's speech. First of all, he acknowledged it's a 63-year-old problem. And secondly, unlike, the state government or the Home Ministry, he did not even once mention, Pakistan or, these Lashkar Taiba and other forces for creating this upsurge. I mean, he in a way tried to acknowledge the real problem that's on the ground. But having said that, I would like to say that, the Kashmiri people had given them a chance for the withdrawal of troops in a very honorable way. When there was more peace, there was more tranquility, the militancy has gone down. But unfortunately, even when the committee was set up under the Defense Ministry, when we forced them to do that, nothing really happened. And Prime Minister said something about the demoralization of the forces and police. Let me tell you, Barkha, even in spite having this ESPA and such huge presence of security forces, today the security forces and the state police is demoralized, not because, they don't have enough powers, because they are in direct confrontation with their own people, with children, with young women who are unarmed, and they have to kill them.
No, I agree. I think it must be extraordinarily difficult to be in the Jammu and Kashmir police right now, given what's happening. If I can get now Najib Mubaraki in from the Economic Times, who's written 2 absolutely brilliant pieces in your paper, Najib. And we all speak, some of us speak on behalf of the Kashmiri youth, and then the politicians speak on behalf of the Kashmiri youth. But the Prime Minister, and speaking today not as a journalist but as a Kashmiri, the Prime Minister was really trying to reach out to people like you. And before I ask you, I just want to read out a couple of quotes from your articles. You said protesters are children of stone, they're hard, unyielding, refusing to crack. You also spoke about how these protests are about resisting the obfuscations that Delhi has indulged in for decades now. And you also speak about wondering whether New Delhi actually realizes the new potent political challenge in Kashmir, whether it even understands the depth of the anger that we're seeing on the streets of Srinagar. Do you believe that the Prime Minister's address today reflected any such understanding?
Well, I think as prime ministerial statements go, there was nothing wrong with it, But there is, for example, when the Prime Minister, I think he mentioned that schools are closed and they have to be reopened because people have, without education, they will have no future. But I think partly the problem is that the protesters in Kashmir are also protesting that they don't have a future, that they see no future in the present setup. And they certainly seem to be saying that they don't see any future within the Indian Union. Now, the problem is when I talk about the obfuscations or the distortions that happen, it's not just about the government, it's also about the media, about how the media represents what happens in Kashmir. From everything, from colluding with the government, from everything from it being, inspired by, across the border.
But there isn't one media. I mean, there isn't one politician, there isn't one media.
One talks about in a sort of a generalization. Yes, a generalization that happens. So they're also protesting against that. I mean, the protests are also about the day-to-day killings that happen, but they're also about the desire for a great, deeper, lasting political resolution of the long-festering problem.
Did you agree with Sajjad that, given that the Prime Minister spoke about the jobs panel, that somewhere it blurred the message of the speech? Because to me it was actually very, very interesting that he made zero mention of using some key phrases that have come to define the narrative. Instigated violence, no mention. Pakistan, no mention. Lashkar, no mention. He didn't even mention stone belting. He didn't talk about it. He just said, I understand your pain, I understand your anguish, talk to us. But then he went on to talk about local elections and the jobs panel. So do you agree with Sajjad and Mehbooba that blurred the impact?
Well, perhaps it did, and what I would also say that in the talk about economic packages or job packages, quite frankly, people in the valley would consider that an insult, because their idea is.
Why?
Because the protesters are not out protesting for jobs. They're not asking for an economic package. They're not even asking for, in a sense, some political package. But they're asking for a wider, deeper resolution of the Kashmir problem. And unless and until, I mean, there is a realization that this political challenge has to be met. And it can't be met merely by a discourse of either rights or economic packages or cosmetic political initiatives.
So that's an interesting way to put it. Nothing too wrong with the Prime Minister's speech, but not really travelling the full length. I don't know that a Prime Minister can actually do that in a sense on national television in any case, but was an attempt made. Let me get the national political perspective in. Abhishek Singhvi, Ravi Shankar Prasad. Abhishek Singhvi, I have a more basic question. I remember you and me debating Kashmir last week, and you said, Barkha, give me a specific suggestion, and I said, why doesn't the Prime Minister go on national television and talk to the people? Why doesn't the Chief Minister go to the hospitals and meet the injured? These are commonsensical things, and many people, Abhishek, are saying, why was the Prime Minister silent for 2 months? Why did it take, whether you say the official number is 49 or 51, why did it take, you know, we get up in Parliament and we say these are our own people. Don't our own people need more direct engagement of the kind that we saw from the Prime Minister today, but why was it so late in the coming?
Barakha, first of all, let it not be like a Panchtantra tale that if he does this, you criticize the supposed delay, and if he doesn't do it, you criticize why he's not doing it. I think you have to appreciate the larger picture. This is a very innovative, out-of-the-box initiative. It is a bold initiative. It's very easy to talk about these things, but few governments and few parties have done it. It's the UPA, Congress-led UPA, which has done it. Hello?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Singhvi. Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
That's number one. Secondly, I think you have to read the subtext in the Prime Minister's message also. The subtext is a very clear message that this will be a very holistic mix of a clear political move, but along with that, fundamentals. And I certainly do not agree with this concept of blurring. If you talk of good things in the same message, they don't blur. They reinforce each other. They cross-fertilize each other. I think it is oversimplistic to suggest that to talk of schools and to talk of economic rejuvenation is kind of blurring a message. It is not, one is not a substitute for the other. Thirdly, I think the fundamentals remain the same. This is a calibrated decision. This is a well thought out decision, but it is certainly not irreversible.
Why was
if
it so
all
late?
Stakeholders, by all I mean all political...
I'm only trying to understand why we lost all this time. No. I'm not saying that it would. No. I'm not saying this is going to solve anything. I'm just trying to understand what the thinking is in the Congress. Why was it so late? It's the same question I would put to the National Conference. Why did the Chief Minister take 2 months to go to a hospital?
No, I don't agree that it's so late. I think Kashmir had a very positive atmosphere till a few weeks ago. It has suddenly turned all right. 2 months,
not a few weeks, 2 months.
No, I think that the people have been speaking. Just the Prime Minister's government has been taking initiatives. He may have spoken now, but initiatives have been taken earlier. The Home Minister has spoken. The Prime Minister visited Kashmir not too long ago. I think this is all part of one continuity. You just can't say that one particular statement today has come too little too late. It's part of a continuity.
Okay, Ravi Shankar Prasad, the BJP almost didn't attend the meeting today. It took the Home Minister to call personally to say that this was an invitation from the Prime Minister. At this level of petty politicking, how are we going to solve Kashmir?
Barkha, let me first say one thing. You have a point when you say that the PM spoke quite late. But let me take the issue of political engagement and political issues being articulated by some of my friends from Kashmir. I had occasion to come on your channel some time ago, and I had made a point, and today it is time to repeat it. Fair enough, leave aside the economic issues. We had 2 elections which are fair, one under Vajpayee government and one under Manmohan Singh government. Mahmoodaji's father was duly elected as the Chief Minister with the consent of the people of Kashmir. In the last election, Omar Abdullah became the Chief Minister along with Congress coalition with overwhelming support from the people of Kashmir. And Mr. Sajjad Lono also lost the election. He tried for the first time. Why is it and how is it that the same Kashmiri people who voted for a democratic process under the Constitution of India today have become so alienated that as if the political resolution being talked about is only in the terms of Mr. Gilani.
What's your explanation? What's your explanation? Ravi,
Yes,
what's your explanation?
My explanations are twofold, Barkha. A gross failure of the administration, a gross indifference of Omar Abdullah or the Congress government. We had also Ghulam Nabi Azad government. Mehbooba ji also is a member of parliament. They have reclaimed the political space from the 10 years of terrorism which we witnessed in Kashmir. Now why is it that when the democratic process is there, when the tourists are flocking to Kashmir, where things are getting comfortable, suddenly we see this kind of upsurge? Can we completely ignore the unfinished agenda of Pakistan angle? Mr. Gilani has appealed, but Gilani has also said that unless you involve Pakistan, unless you declare Pakistan as Kashmir as a disputed territory, no dialogue is possible. Now what one should make out of it? And about the armed forces, let me say only this very clearly and categorically. I don't support any human rights violations here. If children have been killed, they are wrong. But can we ignore one basic fact, that the majors and colonels are also getting killed by the terrorists there? They have been saving Kashmir,
which is
even
why
for
maybe you
Kashmiri
need
people.
a political solution, so you don't send out young soldiers and policemen as cannon fodder into daily hostile confrontation with people. I mean, if we care about our soldiers, don't we want to see an end to this conflict? Ravi, just hold that thought. I want to put this to Najib before I get Mehboob Beg and Mehbooba Mufti on this question that the two national politicians have raised. Elections come up again and again. And I ask you this again in your capacity of being a young Kashmiri. And you've got Omar Abdullah sitting there as India's youngest chief minister. And when the turnout, and I know that there have been many rigged elections, but there is a large consensus that 2002 and 2008 were different elections. Do you accept Ravi Shankar Prasad's argument that if the if the state government had performed differently, we would not see this extent of alienation?
Well, about the elections, it's a slightly complex thing why
people vote.
Why people voted in that election. But it certainly wasn't a referendum for India. People didn't vote in that election, and you know, to the extent that local candidates of various parties would be going around telling people that this is not a vote on Azadi, this is not a vote on India, but this is a vote for your local problems, for your governance issues. I mean, there is a that sort of thing, and also the other aspect of people wanting somebody to turn to when an incident giving the crushing and overwhelming presence of the security forces in ordinary lives of Kashmiris happened, and a boy would be picked up. Who do you turn to?
Do you accept that soldiers suffer too?
Well, in a larger, sort of, if you talk about
human suffering equal across the divide?
Well, when you talk about, sort of a, this rather vague but certainly true idea of a larger human suffering, yes, obviously, people suffer.
It's not vague. I mean, people die. It's as specific as that.
It is. I mean, and it's mostly Kashmiris who are dying. I mean, somebody said, army
people... No, in these 2 months, it's the Kashmiris who've died, but through this turmoil, many soldiers have died in encounters and so on.
Yes, so yes, I mean, so the point is getting into figures, who died, I mean...
No, I'm not trying to do that. I'm not doing a statistical comparison. I'm just saying, therefore, everybody must want this conflict to end. Siddiq Wahid, when we were in Srinagar last week, you raised the question about this being a 10-day lull in this period between the first spate of violence and the second, and how nothing happened. What, for you, is the big message, if any, from the Prime Minister's address today?
Really, the big message is status quo that I hear.
You thought it was a status quoist address?
Very much. And let me explain. I thought, Mr. Singhvi, I think, said that there was an out-of-box sort of, speech. And I would really sincerely want to ask him what was out-of-box about it.
I think he means just the very thing of going on. If I'm not wrong, the only Prime Minister to have done this before is Jawaharlal Nehru. I mean, to actually I think he meant the out-of-box thing was the going on to television and talking directly to...
Well, all right, fine. If that was out-of-box, I'll accept it. But the point was there were 2 or 3 points made. One point was that we will, try and get jobs for the youth and so forth. The second point that was made is we want talks to happen. And the third point made was an elliptical sort of mention of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, and we'll talk about it. And I don't see any of these as being out of box. I don't see any of these as being anything that will carry the argument forward. I think that leadership is about taking risks. And I didn't see the risk involved here. We now have the BJP saying in an earlier sort of comment that, there's no need to even talk. We are hearing the BJP bringing up elections and saying you have a duly elected government And so what's the big deal? I mean, and why did you lose that political space? The point is that I don't know the exact figures on how many people actually voted. But if you look at that figure and the ones who didn't vote, you know, you get a completely different picture. So I think that it is...
But I don't know that we should underestimate what has happened in the mishandling of these last 2 months. I mean, to my mind, they're just some basic human things that people do. When people die, political morality demands that you reach out to people. I mean, that's the only point I'm putting out there. It's not going to solve the Kashmir issue, but it's basic political morality.
And that's good. I mean, to that extent, and if it is out of box to address people and say that, you know, that we will move forward from here, I mean, it's good. And it's
okay. Now, let me take this to Sajad Lone. We've also got Mehboob Beg of the National Conference joining us. Sajad Lone, you said the message got blurred. Abhishek Singhvi says, look, just because you say two different things, it doesn't take away from the first. I'm asking you realistically, and you know, you're a realist, Sajad. In 2002, you fielded proxy candidates. Now you're talking about being within the electoral framework of Kashmir. I think somewhere you understand that's the pragmatic approach that, you know, that's my reading of your politics. Realistically speaking, what could the Prime Minister of India have said that he didn't say?
Barka, first of all, I'm so thankful to you that at least you gave me an opportunity, because Mr. Ravi Prakash Mr. Ravi Shankar did repeat it earlier on, so did Mr. Singhvi about me fighting elections. Let me make it very clear. I am not enamored by Indian democracy or the perks of a parliament member that I fought.
But Indian democracy allows you the space.
On my heart,
but Sajad, Indian democracy, just to say, allows you the space to come on this show and say what you believe. That is Indian democracy.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
No,
you're a great
it's not
nation.
a favor, but it is democracy. It's not a favor, but it is democracy. Go ahead.
Just listen to me for a moment. Is that the power of my action, what I did, is eroded when people here market my fighting an election as if I become ostracized. I've become ostracized in my own society. It's a social stigma here. People thought I was betraying them. That is how people view, because I was not a mainstream politician. They thought he has switched over, he is a traitor, he is betrayed. My only idea was to go there, go down on my knees and tell the people there that for God's sake, this is what people want there. They don't want to live with you. It's now up to you what you have on offer to Kashmiris. That's what I will say even today, that everybody knows what the reference point in Kashmir is. Now, after 20 years, I don't think the Prime Minister needs to be tutored what Kashmiris want here. Now it's time for Indian state to come up and say, this is what we have to offer. Enough of prevarication, dialogue. You know, they just have to come up and say, this is what we have to. I'm not saying today or tomorrow. And don't use elections. The very fact that you have strife and 50 people are killed shows the futility of elections in the long-term macro picture of the political resolution of Kashmir issue. This is a lesson for both Indian state and even for those separatists who boycott elections. That elections got nothing to do with the people don't correlate the two. It is the politicians and the Indian state who correlate them.
Sajad, if I may interrupt you, because we're getting some news that in his closing remarks at this all-party meeting, the Prime Minister has spoken about autonomy. And I'm just going to read this out from the screen. If consensus on autonomy is reached, then we can consider it as long as it's within the ambit of the Constitution. These are the Prime Minister's closing remarks. I'm waiting for more information to come on this. Mehboob Beg, can I get your initial comments on this? And then Mehbooba Mufti, that autonomy within the ambit of the Constitution can be considered. The National Conference has had an autonomy report that nobody has looked at for 10 years. Do you think there's half a chance that they may look at it now?
Barkha, there is nothing, no condition should be put to it, because this is just to confuse the entire country. Question is, when you talk about autonomy, it was we are talking about restoration of autonomy. We are not asking for anything new. They are trying to confuse it as if we are demanding something entirely new. Because it is the only state, the state of Jammu and Kashmir, we have to look at the history, which negotiated its relationship with the rest of the country and became a part of it. It was autonomous state of Jammu and Kashmir. That means at the time of accession, we conceded only in 3 subjects, that was defense, foreign affairs and communication.
But Mehboob, we will look at the philosophical point of autonomy in just a minute, but can I ask you one thing? It's widely believed that while you keep saying, and your party keeps saying, that Delhi has to do something, what about your own government? Would you, I mean, the Prime Minister conceded that mistakes have been made. Are you willing to concede that your party has made mistakes in how it's chosen to handle the last 2 months?
Look, Barkha, question is, even at the time of assembly elections, if you recall, because you have been closely connected with Kashmir affairs, if you recall, all the regional political parties, the mainstream political parties you call them, maybe my party, Jammu Kashmir National Conference, or any other party, we one and all told voters that we are here to govern, we are here to give you sadak, pani, bijli and sehat and education. We did tell them that so far as political issue is concerned, political issue has to be resolved politically. So don't try to confuse the two. Your Chief Minister
said to me in an interview that his credibility had been destroyed and he would need to build it brick by brick. Mehbooba Mufti, if I can take the autonomy news development to you now, the PDP has a self-rule proposal, the NC has an autonomy proposal. Is there a realistic acceptance that these are the solutions? And I'm not talking about what would happen if there were a referendum. I'm simply saying, as realistic politics go, is there an acceptance that these are the frameworks within which solutions have to be found? Even Musharraf at one point, when things were better between India and Pakistan, spoke about his famous 4-point formula, which essentially spoke about greater autonomy on both sides of Kashmir.
Well, I would say that it will be, very wrong on anybody's part to force a resolution on people without, taking everybody on board. And as far as autonomy is concerned, it is something between the state and the center, and Kashmir has many dimensions. Its external dimension, its finance dimension, its internal dimension. So I would say any resolution has to be through the dialogue, where you take everybody with different ideologies on board so that it becomes acceptable to people. Because let us not, confuse the resolution with transfer of power or center-state relation. Center-state relation or autonomy is a part of the resolution. But if you want to address the other Kashmir, our relation with the other Kashmir, and also want to involve Pakistan in a positive manner rather than giving them an opportunity to fish in the troubled waters, then you need to have a bigger picture. And please, I would request the panelists, stop looking at elections, last elections as a resolution to the Kashmir problem. We have had elections since 1947, 51. But even have had autonomy. Why Sheikh Abdullah was dismissed and he preached plebiscite for 22 years? They had all the autonomy at that point of time, maybe more what they are demanding now. So I would say if we really are looking for a resolution, the land is already with the country. If you want to win over the hearts and minds of the Kashmiri people, especially the youth, you have to come with something very imaginative. Something which gives these Kashmiri youth a partnership with the rest of the country. They have to be partners.
Okay.
You have to give them back their,
But how? What is the mechanism? I mean, that's, I think, what I'm trying to raise on the program. Amitabh Mattu, if we can bring you in. Siddiq Wahid says that the Prime Minister's speech was status quoist. It said nothing new. It said nothing wrong, but it said nothing new. Do you agree?
I read the Prime Minister's speech very carefully on the web a few minutes ago, and I think it was an extraordinary speech, but we are also living in extraordinary times. In ordinary times, I think it would have sent a fantastic message, but whether it will douse the fire and quell the rage of the youth remains to be seen. However, I think 3 key points need to be made. One, the Prime Minister clearly stated that the key problem, as he understood it, was one of political alienation. Secondly, he also said that he believes that there should be an honorable and just settlement of all the problems, which on the basis of the opinion of all sections of opinion in J&K, and recognizing, however, that this is a complex problem and this may take some time. And finally, he also said that all stakeholders must arrive at a consensus on their vision of the future of Jammu and Kashmir based on practical realities of our time. Now, this is a Prime Minister who's heading a coalition government and who, as you realize, does not have much support from the BJP on this issue.
Yeah.
I think given these circumstances, and I'm not trying to defend him, and I think he should have said this a month ago.
Absolutely.
But under these circumstances, he's really addressed the heart of the problem, the political heart of the problem. And I think it's also time now for all the stakeholders in Jammu and Kashmir, to also take some risks. As I agree with Siddique that there has to be risk-taking. Peace is not an easy business.
That's an interesting point you raised, that Siddique speaks about the Prime Minister taking risks. But Siddique, if you want to come in on that, are we seeing the state's politicians taking risks?
No. And Barkha, I mean, I think that not just the state's politicians, but all of India will need to take risks on this. Because what is being challenged over here and what is being discussed over here by at least the protesting youth and a large, I mean, one whole part of the state of Jammu and Kashmir as a whole, let's not forget. And that is that they're asking for a redefinition of the sovereignty of the state in relation to Delhi. And that is the risk.
And I understand that that's the sentiment, but here's my practical question to you, Najib. Is there also a realization among the young that we want this, but it won't happen? So we've got to settle for something below it.
Well, purely my personal opinion, but I believe that Kashmiris, if there is a meaningful political process, a dialogue which is really inclusive and open, it could be that Kashmiris prove themselves to be maybe flexible, maybe much more pragmatic than what the image
of being attributed to them.
Not only that, but I think we have to remember that this very topic of the nature of the sovereignty and the relationship between Delhi has been discussed from 1951 onwards, all the way.
No, that's what I said. Even autonomy is a now 10-year-old file.
Exactly. And what has happened is that whatever there was in terms of autonomy, or call it whatever you will, federal sort of freedoms and so forth for Kashmir, have been eroded. So we are at a point now where trust is not just, there's not just a deficit of trust, there's no trust at all. And how do you get it back? I mean, I think that that's the real question.
And to that, if I can go back to my panel, Ravi Shankar Prasad, to you first. Before you start condemning the Prime Minister's closing remarks on autonomy, I will remind you of what your Prime Minister, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, said in Srinagar, actually exactly the same sentiment as Manmohan Singh, saying that whatever, he actually spoke also in Urdu, and he said, "Insaniyat ke daire mein jo bhi mumkin ho, wo hona chahiye," talking about autonomy. So I'm just asking you to remember history before I think you're going to criticize Dr. Manmohan Singh's comments on autonomy. Now, if you would comment on his closing remarks on autonomy at the all-party meeting.
Barkha, in fact, I was going to begin my comments along with what Vajpayee stated in his sterling language. His question was put to him. I know the history of my party, be assured about that. But let me just make two quick very points, because a lot of issues are being talked about the sovereignty of Kashmir, redefining it. What about the democratic existence in other part of Kashmir, Pak-occupied Kashmir? Do the Kashmiris there get proper democracy? Is there fair elections? Because the panelists are having a problem with elections. There is no fair elections at all in Pak-occupied Kashmir. Can we deny it? These are very important questions to be asked. As far as the larger issue of redoing of sovereignty is concerned, since you are having a very free and frank talk, permit me to raise only one issue. When you talk of Jammu and Kashmir, what about the Jammu area? What about Ladakh? They do not have any problem with the redefining of sovereignty. These issues are equally important, which cannot be brushed aside. Having said that, when the details of PM's proposal would come about, namely, within the frameworks of the Constitution of India, we can talk about it.
Okay.
We have always said, if Kashmiri people want decentralization of power, why? We can certainly talk about it. But if it talks of secession from India, Kashmir becoming independent, sovereignty of India being completely weakened or minimized, sorry, we have a serious problem there.
Okay. Sajjad, before we take a break, can I get you to respond to something that's sensitive? But one of the things connected to Ravi's point about what about Jammu, what about Ladakh, are concerns that what we're seeing today is not just very angry young men, but we're seeing radicalized young men. That we're seeing nobody talking about Kashmiri Pandits. Yes, everybody makes token comments about how Pandits must come back home and so on. But are we in danger of religion defining what started off as a political separatist sentiment?
No, not necessarily. I think this whole concept of aspirations has been created in these conferences, TV debates. You can't actually go on a mohalla basis and ask them what your aspirations are. There are some areas in Jammu who have a different aspiration, but that's a tiny minority. You talk of Ladakh. What is the population of Ladakh? You can't mix all them. Barkha, I'll tell you that this internal autonomy proposal is stuck in time, way outdated. They will have to make the reference point that people want independence. I'm not saying give it to them, but that's the reference point, accept it, and then start moving. How much Kashmiris will move away from it, and how much India will move towards the reference point. That is how you need to start it. You need an evolutionary model, something which evolves, which is eclectic, and no national pride. Now you say Jammu, fine. There are 2.5 or 3 districts, I don't know.
I'm merely raising, Sajjad, the question about whether the movement within the valley is in danger of getting Islamized.
No. You see, we are all proud Muslims, but this is a political movement. There are some people who have religious connotations to it, like the BJP has overtly religious Hindu credentials. Similarly, here also some have overtly Muslim credentials. So it balances out the two. So it's not like if you have that level of tolerance in India that you allow them, you know, why don't you allow these people here also?
Okay.
You know, it's not a crime to be a Muslim and be
no, of course
have a
it
Muslim
isn't. Of course it isn't, and that was certainly not my question. We will look a little more at the psychology and the psyche of Kashmir's generation next. We'll take a quick break. After the break, 2 young Kashmiris joined this panel. They've heard the politicians. What do they think? Coming up next on the other side.